I was pleasantly surprised when I watched HBO's The Prince.
Huh?
I went in with not only incredibly low expectations, but incredibly specific low expectations. Basically, after shows like Hoops and Paradise PD, I've been conditioned into expecting every adult animated... I'm not going to say this next word, to just be loud, obnoxious, and gross the whole way through, and that's the joke. The Prince, on the other hand, isn't as loud, gross, and obnoxious as I've come to expect from these shows. Sometimes, often in fact, it's just not funny.
Not a little boy any longer. I don't have to go running whenever she...
Charles, we're leaving.
Coming, mummy.
Wow, this From the Off places it way above a lot of other current adult animated comedies. I said I wasn't going to say that word, including the aforementioned Hoops and Paradise PD. Now, I'm going to be sharing a lot of opinions today. You might disagree, but even if you agree completely and don't have any complaints to make, please at least try to find something to say to your Twitch audience. The Prince centers around the British royals, most of the characters being actual members of the British royal family. It currently has one season of 12 episodes at an unconventional 13 minutes each, because truly the move from broadcast television to streaming services has opened up countless new avenues for creative possibilities, and it's often pretty hard to identify the comedy in this show. You'll watch a scene that may have been presented within the conventions and typical rhythms of a comedy, but the actual material you're expected to laugh at features no kind of meat to dig your teeth into. I think the perfect opening example to demonstrate this is these two members of the Queen's Guard. These two get given a running gag that comes up semi-regularly and spans multiple episodes.
Here's the joke.
All right, you can go.
You just hit me with your hat.
That was it! This, gag then gets repeated multiple times, as is part of the course with a running gag.
Do you understand what that means?
Yes, Your Majesty. What does it mean? You're always hitting me with your hat.
Until finally it concludes in this epic climax.
Stop!
What's going on here?
Okay, so the joke is that one guy hit another guy with his hat, until eventually, wow, he said stop. He must be moderately annoyed. This bit is so lacking that it almost feels like an anti-joke to me, like a deliberate deconstruction of the very notion of slapstick comedy, an art form with a rich history of elaborate and potentially absurd set pieces, all resulting in someone falling over, getting something unfortunate in their face, or being in any other way physically inconvenienced.
Are you all right in there?
Fine, thank you.
And here they just do a gag with no effort. In the most minimal possible, one guy leans over and bumps another guy slightly. I genuinely can't even tell if I'm supposed to be laughing at the bump or at the guy pointing out that the bump happened.
You're always hitting me with your hat.
Or the fact that there's a brown window frame in the background. I don't know. All of these things have an equal amount of funny in them. Maybe this was all just supposed to be an extravagant, multi-episode setup for that one guy finally saying,
Stop!
He expressed distaste. Is it funny now? And don't worry, I see you little devil's advocates out there. I know what you're thinking. Maybe when you watch more than literally just these 3 seconds of the show and you actually get to know these characters, this gag will be better. A lot of great gags from a lot of great comedies don't work so well when you don't know the ins and outs of the specific characters. So, who are these guys? Well, I've already shown you basically all their dialogue from the entire show. Delivering this running joke is pretty much the only purpose they serve. You know, you couldn't really call them characters in the same way that you wouldn't use the word characters to describe the Emperor's Royal Guard, Orion. As a result, these gags are pretty much entirely separate from the rest of the show. Not only do you not need context to understand them, there's no context I could possibly give them that would change how they come across to an audience. What I've shown you is its own neat little package. Well, on the bright side, at least they featured some of the Queen's Guard without doing the painfully overplayed cliche where,
Let's see if we can make one smile.
oh, that's one of the few other things they do. Now, I do understand that so far I've reviewed 3 seconds of this entire series of television, though I do find it to be a perfect example of what the comedy in this show is like. It resembles comedy, sure, but you'd be hard-pressed to describe what the actual joke is. The same thing is true when we look at the material being delivered by some of the show's more significant characters. As someone who personally doesn't really care that much about celebrities like Kim Kardashian, who got famous without actually doing anything, I've never really paid much attention to the Queen, but have skimmed her Wikipedia page to give a proper, flowery introduction to the woman herself before before we talk about how this program chooses to portray her. Ah, yes. Ah, yes. Oh. In real life, Elizabeth II has been the Queen of the United Kingdom for more than 10 years, and is generally known to be a wee bit on the posh side. The article about her personality describes her as quite formal, which I already knew. It turns out, though, she's actually so posh that her Wikipedia includes an exhaustive list of people who at social events have dared to touch her with their peasant hands. You know, she's also literally a monarch, so there's that. The Prince is, of course, a comedy, and so it's tried to achieve a comedic portrayal of this famously posh and reserved woman by portraying her as not reserved. Ooh, cheeky.
I'll say whatever I want, bitch.
Pleasant weather.
Stop jabbering, you two. We're not Italians.
Your Majesty, this is
Just shut up and put it down. I will fuck you up, girlie. You sound like a fucking idiot, you fuckers.
This is the whole joke. You see, it's funny because in real life the Queen is posh and reserved, whereas here she's angry and shouting fuck at people. If you don't find the idea of portraying the Queen in a way that she is not actually like inherently funny, then you may as well skip all of her scenes as you're already not watching this show. There is nothing more to it. Here's an example.
Welcome, Your Majesty.
Excuse me.
Oh my good gosh, the Queen has done a burp. It appears to me at least that the entirety of the joke here is the juxtaposition between how the Queen is commonly perceived and how she's being portrayed here. It's shock humor where the extent of the shock is that a posh person belched. And not only that, look at how rude and abrasive the Queen is, lol, is the only joke they do with her. This joke is 6 episodes into a show that's just spent the last 5 episodes doing the same joke. You're used to it by now. You are watching a show that somehow manages to make the joke, a character does a burp, less funny in context. Here's another absolutely classic bit of Queen comedy. The context is she's going to an event soon and she wants to know if one of her favorite foods is going to be served as a dining option.
Will there be the little thing that I like to eat?
Her staff tell her that yes, it will be available.
Yes, ma'am, the flummery tart, of course.
And here's the joke.
Good. I fucking love that thing.
Oh my god. She said fuck. She's the Queen. She doesn't say fuck. Whoa. Satire. You know what I think when I hear this material? I think, damn, you sure could get 12 episodes out of that. Let's have a look at one of the other characters. Let's have a look at the jokes they make with Princess Charlotte. She's the little sister of our main character Prince George, but despite her young age, she's a spy with quite a lot to hide. And that's it. That's the joke. That's supposed to be funny on its own, I guess. She'll appear about once per episode, clearly doing something a little bit shady. People will ask if she's up to something, and then she'll be like, no. And that's it. That's her involvement. That's her character. That's what she's for. Episode 1.
Who the hell is calling you?
No one. I can't talk now. They're all watching me. And I'm watching them. Hi, Mummy.
Episode 2.
I told you I'll call when it's safe.
What's going on with you?
George is pretty.
Episode 3.
I'm making progress. Do not call this number again. Hi, I'm Charlotte.
Episode 4. There's not one in episode 4. Episode 5.
I'll get you the documents, but I'm going to need more time. Hi, George.
Were you just... Never mind.
Episode 6.
I'm working on it. Hi, George.
Hey, why do you have 2 cell phones?
It's a toy for little girls.
Slum 7.
We're going to the grill.
How long, exactly?
What is up with you?
And so on. This spy stuff is basically her entire role in the show. She doesn't seem to have a single other trait besides spy. This is in essence all we get from her character. I mean, eventually it does evolve into longer scenes of her doing more explicit spy stuff, like this sequence of her stealing a few folders, each of which is helpfully labeled documents. And while I'm sure it's possible to write loads of great jokes about a child princess actually being a spy, the prince seems to think that just doing her character trait again is comedy in and of itself. Although I have to say, seems to think, because it is hard to tell what is and isn't supposed to be a joke in this show. Unironically, that's a problem I had to deal with writing this script. A lot of what's presented as if it were funny bears so little resemblance to actual comedy that it's hard to tell which bits I'm supposed to be laughing at. Like, right, okay, look at this moment. I'm about to show you a line of dialogue that's presented in every conceivable way as a joke. The scene itself is about various characters trying to get Prince Philip to drink some tea. Then there's a break from the main action of the scene where we cut to our uninterested main character, Prince George, George, who delivers one line, and then we get back on with the scene. It has nothing to do with anything else that's going on in the show at that moment, but we pause for it anyway. It is unambiguously being presented as a joke. Here it is.
Huh, neat. Demi Lovato is non-binary. Good for them.
Yeah, that's it! This joke completely eludes deconstruction because who fucking knows what the funny bit's meant to be? So yeah, sorry if I do these comedians a disservice by assuming that something was supposed to be funny and docking points for it when it actually wasn't even a joke to begin with, but this wouldn't have been a problem if they'd remembered to put comedy in the jokes. So yeah, I think these spy moments with Charlotte are supposed to be funny, but you know, it's hard to tell. Why not leave your best guess in the comments? Easily the most fleshed out character in the show is Prince George, which makes sense. He is the protagonist. He is gonna have the lion's share of flesh. Unlike a lot of the characters in the show who are entirely one note and just exist to deliver the same joke over and over again, to the show's absolute credit, Prince George is a character with fully developed motives, values, and traits. He's not a complex character by any stretch of the imagination, but he is consistently written with characterization that naturally lets the audience understand who he is as a person. A massive twat. Prince George is portrayed as being incredibly vain.
It's really been a day.
Placing massive value on celebrities and stardom for entirely superficial reasons, completely unempathetic, placing himself above everyone else around him and not taking any notice of anyone else's feelings or well-being.
Do you have any tea that doesn't taste like piss when you hand in my homework?
It's blank, though.
So fill it out.
He is transparently manipulative and often openly malicious. These traits, though, are naturally and well integrated into a consistent character. I'm gonna say a lot of negative stuff about this show in this video because it's shit, but at the end of the day, the show gives us sufficient characterization to communicate a clear impression of the main character, which is a lot more than can be said for some other stuff I've covered on this channel. Although, I'm not gonna name any names here. I don't want to piss off any stars or Ryan. However, despite the fact that Prince George's characterization is much more extensive than other characters we've covered so far in this video, that doesn't mean that the comedy they do with him is any different. A huge amount of the time, what you're expected to laugh at is simply him doing his character traits. You know those clips I already showed you of him being an asshole? I'm pretty sure those were supposed to be funny moments. The line,
"Do you have any tea that doesn't taste like piss?"
fills a space in the dialogue that conventionally a joke would appear in. It is presented in the episode within the conventional rhythm of a comedic moment, but the material is just a guy who's always rude to the people he views as beneath him is rude to people he views as beneath him. And I'm just like, yeah, I know, he does this. Thanks. And even if it wasn't meant to be a funny moment, it's not like I laughed at any other place in the episode, so now that we've set up some of the pieces that this comedy is working with, I'd like to do a scene deconstruction or two. I want to go through what I consider to be some typical scenes from this show so that you can get a sense of how it all actually flows together.
Oh, shut up.
You shut up.
It's gonna be hilarious! One of the most common types of scenes the show does will be one where the entire family is sitting around, each taking it in turns to add their bit of comedy to the comedy pile and bring whatever it is their character brings to the table. I chose to watch this show, I have only myself to blame. All these scenes are pretty similar, there's not much to choose between them, but I've taken my first example from episode 5. The scene opens with the Queen asking,
Hey, who'd you have to fuck to get a mimosa around here?
and Prince Philip makes some incoherent old man noises,
Make it 2, Mary.
which the Queen understands to be him asking for a drink as well. Yes, Prince Philip's old man noises are something that have happened enough for us to be used to by now. The two then get their drinks, but Prince Philip gets his in an IV bag because, you know, he's old, that's the joke. This is the entire bit. We then move on to William and Kate, who deliver us this gag.
I'll have another as well.
Maybe just orange juice for Kate.
Maybe just champagne.
Now, the conflict between these two is pretty clear here, but there are a few things that make me suspect this is actually supposed to be a joke. Not a good sign when you have to say that reviewing a comedy, but first and foremost, these lines are almost entirely separate from the rest of the scene. They don't set anything up or pay anything off. Cut them out, and nothing about the rest of the scene has to change to accommodate for the fact they're not there anymore. Logically speaking, the only thing I can conclude that they could be there to accomplish is to be funny, or I guess to pad the runtime. The other thing that really rumbles my suspicions is the fact that this is a running gag. They have these interactions regularly, and they're normally, broadly speaking, as minimal as this. Kate will go for a drink. William will say, you're drinking a lot.
Little early for a 4th glass, don't you think?
And Kate will say, fuck off.
Why don't you go hit another ball through a fucking loop?
So yeah, pretty confident that was meant to be a joke, and I think the fact that I felt I had to prove to you that it was a joke speaks volumes more than my criticisms of the joke ever could. We then move on to a bit from Prince Charles.
Mummy, Camilla had a smashing idea.
We're about to get another running gag. What always happens in this one is Prince Charles will talk to the Queen and volunteer his wife Camilla for something. She'll look very clearly visibly uncomfortable but won't actually say anything. She never says anything. And then the Queen will scorn Camilla for the suggestion.
Mummy, Camilla's desperate for you to do Pilates with her. Mummy, doesn't Camilla look like a Victoria's Secret model?
You know when I'm available, Camilla? When fucking hell freezes over. If Victoria's Secret is that she's an old cow, then yes.
It's not exactly clear to me what the funny part of this running joke is supposed to be, but let's have a look at the example from the scene we're actually dissecting, shall we? Well, in this scene, Prince Charles suggests that Camilla co-host an upcoming charity event.
She's going to co-host the Gorgenstein's charity event with you, Mummy.
To which the Queen replies,
She couldn't co-host a shit.
and yeah, with that, I'm pretty sure that the joke here is just that the characters are doing their character traits. Again! Prince Charles's character is that he's a mummy's boy desperate to impress the Queen, and the Queen is rude and abrasive. And Camilla doesn't talk. Laugh. In response to this, Prince George does one of his character traits, as he sucks up to the Queen because he's shallow, only really cares about status, and is manipulative, but only in transparent ways that are pretty obvious.
She couldn't co-host a shit.
That's hilarious, Gan. I don't really get it, but it's still hilarious.
Then mimosa starts to drip out of Prince Philip's mouth, and the Queen tells a staff member to get him a bib. Prince Charles then expresses some more enthusiasm about the idea of Camilla co-hosting the later charity event.
You two are going to smash it.
And the Queen insults him, because that's funny.
The only thing I'm gonna smash right now is your thick head.
We'll then move on to a discussion about the fact that no one here even seems to know what the charity event is even for. It's something called Gorgenstein's, but no one actually knows what that is.
What the bloody hell is Gorgenstein's?
This isn't a long discussion though, we only get suggestions from William and Kate,
It's that disease, right?
who just demonstrate that they don't really know what it is.
I thought it was a type of plant.
Could it be both?
This is actually a callback to earlier in the episode when it was established that George doesn't know what Gorgenstein's is.
You have the Queen's charity event for Gorgenstein's.
What the fuck is Gorgenstein's? Never even heard of that.
I guess people not knowing what thing is funny. So, yep, that's another joke in the bag, I guess. We then get what I'm pretty sure is the closest thing to actual comedic material from the entire scene. Remember how I told you that Camilla never actually speaks in this show? Well, Prince Charles says this.
I'm warning you all right now, though. Camilla is an amazing speaker, and she has a barn burner of a speech all locked and loaded.
Yep, that definitely is in juxtaposition to what we've actually seen in the show so far. He said that she's an amazing speaker, and we've never seen her even say a word. That's like approaching being a joke, I guess. And then finally, the scene closes with George saying this.
Yeah, I don't really get her appeal yet, to be honest.
And we then start the next scene, which uses much the same format but is about the staff instead of the royals. That scene opens like this.
Can you stop with the fucking gum?
Oh my god, that guy was chewing gum loudly. And then the other guy got annoyed and told him to stop. Well done, guys. You wrote a joke. I'm so proud of you. Let's put your joke up on the fridge. One guy chews gum loudly and another guy gets annoyed. Yeah! So it's time we ask ourselves, what did that scene achieve for the actual episode it was in? Does it develop the plot, the characters, or is it purely there for the funny bits? Well, it sets up a grand total of one thing that's paid off later in the episode. It's now been set up that at this charity event, Camilla, who doesn't speak at all, is going to give a speech. So I guess it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Are they going to buck the trend and finally give her first line of the show, or is something else going to happen?
Come on, darling. You can do it.
something else happened. Cool. And yeah, that's it. That's all the scene achieves for the rest of the episode at large. So now you should have a pretty good idea of not only everything the scene contains, but also everything the scene is there to achieve. And yeah, this is a very much typical scene for this show. This is one of the main types of scenes the show does. There's very little progression or connective tissue that holds them together. There's not really a natural flow of conversation that takes you with a consistent through line from A to B, more just a barrage of random tangents and detours. In this like 1 minute scene, loads of incredibly loosely connected stuff is just crammed in, some of which is running gags and some of which is just stuff that happens, I guess. It bounces rapidly from thing to thing, desperately avoiding spending more than like 3 lines of dialogue on any given topic at a time. You get a line that sets up one gag.
Who'd you have to fuck to get a mimosa around here?
Then you maybe get a couple more lines that relate to it.
Right away.
Make it 2.
And then you move on to the next gag.
I'll have another as well.
That rarely plays off or builds off of the previous gag, it just also happens. But next, you're not watching a conversation that goes anywhere, you're watching a group of people sit around a table, randomly interjecting with things that I think are supposed to be funny, but they're not funny, so instead you're just watching a scene of something random happening every few seconds, and you're just like, okay. Here's the very first scene from the entire show, because I think it illustrates this point perfectly.
Pleasant weather?
Stop jabbering, you two. We're not Italians.
Okay, so there's already stuff going on here. Charles is trying to make small talk, the Queen is angry. Is what happens next gonna have anything to do with any of that?
Gan, you look so beautiful today. I don't know why they didn't cast Angelina Jolie to play you in The Crown.
I mean, kinda, but only loosely. George just tries to suck up to her. Will what happens next have anything to do with that?
Settle.
Get the defibrillator paddles ready.
Nope, Prince Philip has a random health scare.
No, we're good.
Oh, never mind, it was fine.
Charlotte, can you move over like half an inch, please?
Then Prince George gets annoyed because Charlotte's in his personal space.
And who the hell is calling you?
No one.
Then Charlotte has a spy moment. Okay, is what happens next gonna have anything to do with anything that's happened so far?
Camilla, whatever it is you're dying to say, just spit it out.
No, Mummy, she's fine. That's just how she swallows. It's all good, darling. She loves you.
Nope, it's time for the Queen to start having a go at Camilla completely out of the blue. Are we about to get any expansion on that?
He looks good. Fit.
Nope, Prince Philip has another old man moment, and William comments on it. He actually died 3 months before the show came out. Even when the show does take the time to focus on one thing or one character for a short while, it's still part of the larger episode. The thing is, the show has a huge cast of characters. It is through and through an ensemble piece. You have the main set of royals, which includes everyone from like the Queen and Prince Philip, all the way down to the kids like George and Princess Charlotte. Then you have Harry and Meghan living in LA. Then you have a cast of colourful characters representing the staff, like George's personal servant Owen, a whole range of cooks and cleaners, and Kevin, this evil gremlin type creature. And every individual episode, which may I remind you are 13 minutes or so each, will take some time out to give most, if not all of these characters something to do. Most episodes will have a loose focus on Prince George and whatever he's up to, but won't actually have time to tell that story because they're also interjecting the random shenanigans of like a dozen different characters into an incredibly short runtime. As a result, the actual story of each episode will be so incredibly simple, with the minimum possible amount of exploration or development. Like, here's the entire story of episode 5. George finds out he's going to a charity event, but doesn't know what he's gonna wear. So he decides to hire a stylist. But he doesn't like the stylist, so he fires him. Then he goes to the charity event in his own clothes. That's the end of the story. That's the plot. George decides what to wear to an event, and then he goes to it. That's not it for story though. There's also a B story. The plot of the B story is that the Buckingham Palace staff need a new recruit, so they interview one person and then they hire him. It's not a complex story, but it does introduce Kevin the gremlin creature as a new consistent member of the cast because we needed more of those. The rest of the episode is just taking time out to do random bits with different members of the cast that can last anywhere from 5 seconds to a minute. Now, this isn't an inherently bad way to do comedy. Essentially, what we have is a sketch show held together with an incredibly loose narrative. A narrative that takes the form of both the individual stories of individual episodes and the overarching continuity of the show, which gradually moves and shifts over the course of the series with things like Kevin getting hired to the Buckingham Palace staff. There's no inherent reason that a show formatted in that way can't be really funny. Like, you could totally do a funny comedy sketch about a guy getting interviewed for a job, or even a guy choosing what to wear. But since the plots are so minimal with barely any development, broadly speaking, the majority of what you're going to get out of any given episode is the jokes, which are incredibly minimal and underdeveloped. When often the story of each episode can genuinely be something as minimal as they go on holiday and have a meal on holiday, then have another meal, and that's it, and most of the characters are as minimal as rude and abrasive, mummy's boy, spy. All that's left for you to actually get out of watching that episode is laughing at what you think might be jokes? Probably? For the sake of fairness, I'd like to now assess the material in this show that is most clearly and unambiguously supposed to be funny. Well, similar to some other adult animated comedies I've covered, one joke the prince loves to make is it's funny because they said one thing, but then the opposite thing happens. There's about to be a Game of Thrones spoiler, but it's from season 8, so you don't care. Hey, I'm not about to show you a painfully unfunny joke from the 2021 HBO Max original series, The Prince.
We can finally start Game of Thrones.
Yes, I can't believe we've managed to avoid every spoiler for 11 years.
You guys talking about GOT? I still can't believe Bran got the throne.
God damn it!
Yep, he said that he was glad he never had the show spoiled for him, and then someone spoils the show. Oh. If there was any ambiguity as to whether or not this was the whole joke, we then cut to the next scene. Hey, you know what? I think that joke was so funny and clever that we're not getting its full mileage by just using it once. Yeah. It's a series 1 spoiler this time.
It's okay that we know the ending.
Totally. There's still so much we don't know.
Guys, they're back early. We gotta get up there. Oh, Ned Stark. I was so bummed when they cut off his head at the end of season 1.
This is just some of the laziest material there is. Also, for fuck's sake, dude, it's so clear what he's working his way up to saying. Interrupt him. Tell him to shut up. Put your fingers in your ears and go la 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 la. Don't just sit there literally not being animated as he transparently works his way up towards a spoiler.
Not a little boy any longer. Don't have to go running whenever she...
Charles, hurry up. We're leaving.
Coming, mummy.
They said one thing, but then the other thing happened.
The prince does at the very least have the decency to mix up how it presents these jokes though. Sometimes it's a slow burn. Here's a scene from episode 4 where the Buckingham Palace staff are excited about the imminent arrival of some guests.
They're going to be so much nicer to serve. They're Americans. They're friendly and down to earth.
They'll probably treat us like we're one of them.
We'll become friends. They might invite us for dinner.
When the guests arrive, I wonder what could possibly happen that would be funny.
May I take your bags?
What am I going to do, take them myself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I
don't care.
I might have misjudged this.
But does a gap between the setup and the payoff make the joke funny? Well, no, it's still the same material, it's just spread out. It's still so blindingly obvious as a potential punchline that it straddles the line between a joke and an anti-joke, where it's at this weird middle ground where it's just not a joke. Like, there's this moment where Prince George says that he doesn't get sunburned.
But then you would get sunburned, sir.
It's fine. I only get golden brown. I don't have the complexion of a 60-year-old alcoholic who's been outside twice.
If you're absolutely certain.
And then, the next time we see him in a scene that takes place like 2 minutes later...
Ow. Sorry. Ow. Ow.
And that's it, that's the whole joke. It then cuts to someone else so that something else random can happen.
Harry, I just found out you had a son.
I feel at this point I probably don't have to play the rest of this gag for you to just accept that it's probably not funny. In the gag where George says he doesn't get sunburnt, but then does get sunburnt, whoa! He also gets a line where he's just a dick to Owen.
I don't have the complexion of a 60-year-old alcoholic who's been outside twice.
Which maybe is supposed to be funny as well. I mean, dick is one of his character traits. Let's see, any more moments where I can clearly tell why they're supposed to be funny? Well, there's this moment where Kate is on the phone to Meghan, but then accidentally insults her to her face because she doesn't realize the line is still open.
Who was that? Megan. Some tosser gave her our number.
Oh, shit.
She made a mistake. To be totally honest, I wanted to bring attention to these jokes not because they're any funnier than the rest of the material in the show, but because it's much more apparent why they're supposed to be funny. I think that's the only real substantial difference between these gags and gags we've already covered. I can tell you exactly what's supposed to be funny about those Game of Thrones gags, but ultimately it's material that doesn't bring anything clever, witty, or subversive to the table. The material literally is someone says they're glad a bad thing hasn't happened to them, but then the bad thing does happen to them. Even though it's clear what the joke is supposed to be, it still only resembles comedy. It's like it's trying to trick you into thinking that it is actually funny with joke camouflage. It's presented within the rhythms and conventions of a comedy while containing no actual comedic material to speak of. Also, at one point they forgot to add this guy's face. There is another way though that the show tries to trick you into laughing at these completely comedy-free lines, getting very famous and talented actors to read them. Remember Owen? He's played by Alan Cumming, whose name is genuinely funnier than the show. Prince Harry? That's Orlando Bloom. Just reading the cast list will make you sad that a lot of these wonderful actors are here. We've got Sophie Turner, Ewan Rion, hope I'm saying that right. I like him, but I've never had to say his name before. And, Sacha Dhawan. I'm sorry, man. The Prince boasts a phenomenal cast, performing material that doesn't even utilize a fraction of their talents. It's really frustrating to see all of these people brought together only to be wasted on a writer who can't be bothered to think of any jokes to put in the comedy show. Well, no, it wouldn't be fair to say there aren't any jokes. To offer credit where credit is due, let's take a look at the very, very best material the show has to offer. I'm about to show you what I think is the best constructed joke from the entire show. This isn't a bait and switch, I'm not about to show you someone farting or something. This is something that Prince Charles says about the Queen, who is his mother for anyone who doesn't know, at the Gorgenstein's charity event.
Mummy, you're always talking about charity. Why, I remember you mentioning it the first time we met. I was 7, I believe.
That's it, that's the gag. And while it wouldn't be standout in a better written comedy, it's still very much a functional joke. It has comedic material to offer. The show tries to make a lot of jokes about the Queen not caring for Prince Charles, but normally this just takes the form of her insulting him.
Mummy, mummy, mummy.
You sound like a fucking idiot. That's why you're not king, in case you're wondering.
Which is just like, yep, I know. Yeah. They may as well just put text on the screen that says the Queen doesn't like Prince Charles. However, by setting it up this way during the speech, we don't just get told that the Queen doesn't like Prince Charles. We get to realize that ourselves through the art of implication. The idea that a mother who supposedly raised a child didn't actually meet that child for the first 7 years of their life is going to be absurd to a general audience. There's a clear difference between what a general audience member would assume about any mother-son relationship and what Prince Charles is now saying. And it's up to the viewer to reconcile that difference for themselves, and doing so will lead them to the actual punchline that the Queen is a terrible and absurdly distant parent. Hello, I'm here to suck the joy out of comedy by explaining it. It's a joke about the same thing, but this time it's delivered with wit. The joke is made in a subversive way. You're not just watching characters behave in the way you already know that they behave. Any other time the show managed to get a smile out of me would be a moment when, well, you know how a lot of the scenes are formatted insofar as something random just happens every few seconds? Yeah, well, sometimes the thing that happens would be so stupid that it would catch me off guard. Like there's this moment where the family have just been sitting together eating for a while, and Prince Philip is sitting in the sun, and then randomly he just catches fire.
Oh fuck!
Yep, not gonna pretend that one didn't get me. I do have quite an absurdist sense of humor, and sometimes I will just laugh at a man randomly catching fire. In a show. If in real life I probably wouldn't. But considering in half the scenes in this show a random thing happens every few seconds, there are exceedingly few of these moments. The Prince tries to do several gags like this in like most of its scenes, and in the entire show, maybe 2 or 3 got a smile out of me. In fact, I don't even think Prince Philip catching fire would have got a smile out of me if I'd noticed the sizzling noise they had building up towards it. For me, that moment only worked because of the absurdity of it happening completely out of the blue. If I'd noticed they were building towards it, it wouldn't have had the same effect. It would just be a thing that I could sort of see happening, which is what most of the show is. It never surprises you. Never surprises you. Never. I'm just so confident. There's nothing this show could ever do to surprise me. It's just not gonna happen. yeah, there's an episode of this show that I feel fairly happy calling the good episode. What kind of episode do you think it's gonna be? Well, I'll tell you right now, it's not funny. However, I've already told you that the protagonist, Prince George, despite not being particularly complex, is pretty well characterized in this show. He's also often accompanied by his, personal butler, Owen. You've already seen a bit of it in this video, but George consistently treats Owen like shit. And it's how he treats everyone except people he places value on for their social status. Find pretty much any scene where George is talking to Owen from pretty much any episode, and you'll get some of this.
You have a play date later this week.
Why am I just hearing about this now?
It's been on your schedule for weeks, sir.
First, we'll need a theme. Start thinking Truman Capote's black and white ball, and oh, here I am doing all the work again. Big surprise. I'm just stressed, okay? Give yourself a hug for me. Did my hug make you feel better?
These scenes normally try to make a joke out of the fact that Prince George is an ass to Owen, and Owen just has to suck it up.
Of my deceased wife.
Ugh, not the dead wife again. Babe, move on.
It's not really funny, but as a result of the show consistently trying to do comedy in this way, we have a consistently developed relationship between these two characters. George is an entitled brat who, while depending on Owen's help, still takes him for granted, and Owen is patient and kind enough to consistently just take this stuff, sucking it all up to try and take care of this child. In fact, he has to suck it up or he could face losing his job. Episode 8 takes a step back from the conventional format of this show and gives a focal episode to Owen. Using the already established relationship between these two characters as groundwork, it tells a character-based story that's small enough in scope to fit inside the runtime while still being meaningful. I'm fairly sure it's here to get you to care about the characters in time for the finale, and while the finale is woefully underdeveloped in comparison, this episode does a great job. The story itself sees Owen taking a day off work and going to his home village.
Just leave for God's sake. I think I'll be fine without whatever it is you think you do.
The main meat of the episode covers a series of phone calls that George makes to Owen over the course of the day for various different reasons. At first, George is just making basic requests of Owen.
I was wondering which remote I used to go from Apple TV back to cable.
But over the course of the phone calls, it starts to become clear through some genuinely quite subtle characterization that George also just wants to talk to Owen.
How long is an avocado good for?
They're good for several days.
It's a little brown, it's still okay?
Yes.
Just checking. Is that your garden?
Yes.
In this phone call, for example, he calls Owen with a request that, let's be honest, he probably didn't need to phone Owen to get that sorted. And then, as soon as the request actually is sorted, George's face lights up as he gets to just ask Owen about what he's doing.
Everything is so tiny and cute. It's like you live in a dollhouse, oh.
Suits my needs, sir.
George never quite reaches a point where he feels he can just admit to either Owen or himself that he just wants to chat, but over the course of the episode he gets increasingly closer to that place.
Hello, sir.
Hey, I'm bored.
And a few times in the episode, Owen gets to spend some quiet moments just looking at this old picture of his deceased wife. I can feel how fucking desperate they are to just interrupt this with a fart, but they don't. They don't. The episode culminates in one final call from George to Owen.
I can't sleep.
Would you like me to tell you a story, sir?
Not a baby.
Trying to think of a story to tell, Owen looks over and sees the picture of him with his wife. He then starts to tell the story of a simple man who met a simple woman who makes him feel like the most important person in the world. They live together for years and years until she passes on and the man goes back to feeling unimportant. Except he doesn't always, because often for him, just remembering her is enough to feel special. When Owen gets to the end of his story, he notices that George has fallen fast asleep, and the episode ends tastefully, with no belches, rude awakenings, or someone catching fire or puking everywhere. This story is short, sweet, and simple, and really does give me the sense of a child who's slowly but surely starting to appreciate a parental figure for all they actually do, instead of just taking them for granted because they're so used to them. As well as convincing me of Owen's ability to, despite everything life throws at him, just appreciate the simple things. At any point before this episode, I'd feel it was entirely fair game to wonder if Owen actually cares about George, or is just kind to him because that's his job. But this episode makes very clear the kindness at the core of Owen's character, as well as the fact that he does seem to genuinely care about George's well-being. I'd like to conclude this video by saying, don't watch The Prince. It's really not funny or witty or clever in any way, and there are a million comedies that you could watch that are better. And I mean, episode 8's kind of cute, but it's probably not really worth it, is it? Anyway, here's a fart. Before I leave and start getting worrying ideas about watching Chicago Party Aunt, I would just like to mention that yes, most of these characters are actual real people who exist in the real world. And yeah, while most of these incredibly rich and influential people should be able to take a little mockery from a cartoon, it feels really just, I don't know, I think the word might be pathetic to focus the majority of your energy on a literal 8-year-old? He's not even had a chance to be a dick yet. Why are you going after him so hard? Is it because, and be honest here, you just like Stewie Griffin? And if you want more on that, why not go check out Cynical CJ's video on the topic, because that's all I have to say on the matter. Or, since I've got you here, it would be nice if you checked out some more of mine. They're on the screen. You can click them if you want. I can't make you though. It would be unwise to give me that power. Hope you've enjoyed. A goodbye.